Hey guys, what's up? It's Quan17 here, welcome to another video. Instead of doing a regular gaming commentary today, I decided to make a video about a story from a couple weeks ago. Before I get into this, however, I just want to make it clear that this is a video about a series of pranks, not an actual video of them. I figured that it was alright for me to put pranked in the title since, well, Pyrocynical literally uploaded a video titled Shrek 3 Deleted Scenes, and all he did was shoot worms, and no one seemed to care. Anyways, as some of you long-term subs might remember, over a year ago, I actually went away for a few weeks to Holland where I did a bunch of interesting things, such as mistaking a random girl for Kate Upton and then walking into a tree. As a result of being gone, I ended up missing a bunch of uploads, and while I was there, I stayed with a bunch of different relatives, including my cousin who we will call Cartman for this video. Now, Cartman's a little older than I am, and we generally got along pretty well. However, one key thing about Cartman is that he is a total agitator. He admits it. Pretty much any time he picked up on anything that even slightly annoyed me, he would exploit it to its full extent, and in the process sometimes get me pretty salty. He's also really into, I guess, like, play fighting, which I'm not, and he's also bigger than I am, so as you guys can imagine, I usually ended up losing. And one thing you should know about me is I'm kind of like a little guy. I'm not afraid to admit it. My dad is 5'4", and I'm like 5'8" or 5'9", so in those kind of situations, I usually end up being the loser, unfortunately. Additionally, he's really like shit-talking America, which is fine, you know, I think America's definitely screwed up, except that he does it a lot, and he also talks about how the Netherlands are better, so as you guys can imagine, this kind of stuff can be kind of annoying to me. Fast forward over a year to a couple weeks ago, and now he's visiting me. Now, before I get more into this, I just want to give one more disclaimer, which is that overall, we did have a good time. We ended up doing a bunch of cool stuff, like going to the Ken Griffey Jr. Hall of Fame induction baseball game, and we watched at least 20 South Parks and generally had a lot of fun. But that's not what I'm going to be focusing on in this video. The real story starts about halfway through July when I'm just about to go back to my dad's house after being at my mom's for 2 weeks. Cartman's already stayed at my dad's for a couple days and was at the time staying with my cousin Sam, who's been in several of my videos. I was just finishing up my Pokemon Go video when I get a call from Sam, and according to him, Cartman had just become a vegetarian. Now normally I could care less, don't get me wrong, if you want to be a vegetarian, that is totally fine, and honestly it is probably generally better than eating meat. However, one key thing is that I have a stepmom and a little sister who are both vegetarian, and originally, my little sister was an avid meat eater like me. With time, however, she was slowly converted, and eventually she stopped eating meat altogether, and guys, I'm serious here, my heart was broken. Like, maybe it's just an older brother thing, but I really cared, and it made me so sad that she stopped, and I feel like we lost an important sibling bond there. So with this in mind, I hope you guys can understand why, when I heard that another person had been converted by my family, that I was kind of annoyed for a couple minutes. Pretty soon though, I didn't really care, and the next day I ended up going back to my dad's house. Now remember that I haven't seen Cartman for over a year. Literally the last time I saw him was when I visited him in Holland. The first thing we end up talking about is him being quote-unquote vegetarian, and for the next 2 days straight, I'm mercilessly tormented by him for eating meat. Like, I feel really bad for all the polar bears because their homes are melting and stuff, but I swear to God, if I ever hear that I'm murdering them by eating meat again, I'm gonna be really f***ing triggered. So after 2 days of hearing about what a terrible person I was pretty much at my limit. I'd already told him I'd stop eating meat someday just to get him to leave me alone, and he still didn't. Luckily, I'd had work both of those days, so I had missed about 12 hours of possible torture. Anyways, I had just gotten home from work, and to my surprise, he hadn't even mentioned the polar bear blood on my hands once that night. We were all sitting around eating dinner when I noticed him pick up a plate of chicken and slowly dump some on his plate. Trying to hide my amusement, I looked over at my little sister gloatingly as he took the first bite, and as she looked up, I was surprised. Instead of looking sad or pissed or something, she was smiling. Then probably the cringiest thing that I will ever witness happened. My little sister opens her mouth and goes, "You just got pranked!" It was so bad. Imagine that Pokemon Go kids song, then multiply that by 10 and add my 300 subscriber special video. Apparently, my stepmom, sister, and Cartman had planned this all along to troll me, and I guess to see how annoyed I got at them. And well, I did get pretty annoyed, not really because I had been harassed for my eating habits, but more because my little sister had said something so cringy. Like, guys, it really was bad. Like, I love my little sister and everything, but it was awful. Like, I wanted to be deaf in that moment. It was at this point that I knew I was going to get back at my cousin big time before he went back to the land of windmills and wooden shoes. Now, one thing you guys should know about me is that I am generally a pretty lazy guy, and I'm fine with skipping most things. However, there are two things that I am really OCD about for some reason: brushing my teeth twice a day and lifting weights twice a day. Almost instantly, Cartman picked up on this, and the day after I got quote-unquote pranked, I I found my toothbrush taped to my ceiling, and the day after that, I found my weights hidden in my blankets after being pissed all day about not being able to use them. By then, I already had some ideas on how I would get him back, and to be honest, they were pretty mean. However, I was really salty, and well, if you're gonna turn my little sister into a cringy kid and f my toothbrush and weights, you have to expect some retribution. Initially, I had planned on pretending to drug him, which again sounds really bad. Where I work, they sell a bunch of really weird stuff, including bacon mints, which I have to say are absolutely disgusting. Like, I have this one step cousin who, when I was younger, would literally pay me $5 to eat one. She also never accepted my friend request on Facebook.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
Anyways, I would have put a tiny bit of one in his drink when we were hanging out with my cousin Sam, so that it tasted weird, and then I would say I spiked it or something. It honestly was a really stupid idea that probably wouldn't have worked. Fortunately, Sam had a better idea. Since Cartman is 18, he is legally able to drink alcohol back in Holland, and the entire time he was staying with us, he was pretty sad because he wasn't able to drink any of his fine Dutch beers. He also shit-talked American beer, which is fine I guess, except that he also kind of shit-talked everything American, which kind of pissed me off after a while, even though I'm not a particularly patriotic guy. Instead of just putting one bacon mint in his drink and pretending it was some crazy drug, Sam had an even better idea. Get beers and replace them with bacon mint juice, and that is pretty much what we did. The next week, we were all hanging out at Sam's house, and that's when I finally got my revenge. We were legally able to get our hands on some Amstel Lights, which were the only Dutch beers we could find, as well as some nasty non-alcoholic beers. Sam and I went to the bank, and I withdrew a bunch of money so he could take Cartman out for some lunch, giving me time to prepare our fine Dutch beers for consumption. I started by pouring out 3 Amstels into separate glasses so as not to waste them, just to make this story safe to tell, and also so I wouldn't get possibly grounded, like if my dad watched this or something. I put iced tea in the beer bottles for Sam and me. However, you guys have to remember that it wasn't just my stepmom, sister, and Cartman who had initially pranked me. Sam had been in on it too, so I put some bacon mint juice in his iced tea. For Cartman, I poured some non-alcoholic beer into a bowl and the remaining 95-ish mints, and then started trying to mash them together. Unfortunately, the bacon mints didn't dissolve very well, so I took the bowl upstairs and microwaved it. It kind of made a mess, but it did work, and just as Sam and Cartman got home, I was pouring the microwaved non-alcoholic bacon beer back into the Amstel bottle. While they had been driving home, Sam had been hyping him up about the beers and even told him that we, quote, went through a lot of trouble to get them for him, which we really didn't. Initially, I had been hoping that he would at least have one sip of the beer before figuring out what we did. As I pulled up, however, I realized that given how much shit he had been talking about America and American beer, and how much he had been bragging about Dutch beer, plus how long he hadn't been able to drink for, he might actually drink more than a sip before catching on to what we had done. To maximize this, I took the 3 beers outside and called a toast. Pretty much, I said the usual stuff about what a great trip it had been, and how, since we are teenagers in America, we should all chug our beers. And guys, it worked, like, way better than I ever thought. As Sam and I took a couple sips of our respective iced tea and iced tea with bacon mints, we looked over at Cartman, who had already drank half of his quote-unquote beer, and he wasn't stopping. Once he had drank the entire microwave non-alcoholic beer, 95 bacon mints and all, I asked him how it tasted, and you know what he said? Not wanting to admit that something Dutch, let alone a Dutch beer, tasted bad. He said that he hadn't had that type of beer before, but it was good. And then, in the cringiest voice that I could muster, I went, "You just got pranked, bro!" And yeah, I think he might have puked a few times later, but honestly, he wasn't all that mad. That is until he smelled the bacon mint container, then he chased me around and headlocked me, and that is pretty much it. The next day, he flew back to Holland, and I had avenged my little sister's cringiness. Now, some of you might be thinking to yourselves, oh my god, Quan is just such an asshole. And yeah, you're kind of right. Just remember though, I didn't start this war. Anyways guys, that wraps up this video. Huge shoutouts to both my cousins, especially Cartman, for taking it pretty well and for not getting me back. I do hope you guys enjoyed, and if you did, be sure to drop a like. I should have a video ready for next week, and with that, I'll see you guys then.